you phenomenal little marketing bees. You're tuned in to episode 45 of the Marketing Buzzword Podcast.
This is the Marketing Buzzword Podcast, the podcast where we dissect the world's most common marketing buzzwords. Hold on tight. We are about to fly around the beehive to see the latest buzzwords that stuck to the marketing bees.
Hello again and welcome back to the Marketing Buzzword Podcast. This is a podcast which helps you to understand what all these business and marketing buzzwords actually mean and how they can be helpful or not going forward. I'm your host Ben Roberts, and in this show I'm the marketing bee in charge of making sure I can get on the right guests and ask the right questions to make sure these words and phrases actually make sense. And in today's show we're going to make sense of the buzzword branding, okay? Just pure and simple branding. Before I do that though, I have two things to tell you about, obviously. First one is that this podcast is powered by Talkative. Talkative is a company that brings together live web chat, web calling, video calling and co-browsing together in one package. Essentially allows you to be able to convert more website customers into website visitors into paying customers through human-powered communication. Check it out at talkative.uk. Also, we are well over halfway through the crowdfunding campaign for the new book. You guys are probably getting a little bit sick of me saying about it now, but we are well on target for the number of pre-orders, the minimum target I wanted. We're doing so well at the moment, so please, if you are listening, I know there are so many of you listening, if all of you just ordered a single copy, we will hit that target. Simply just Google Marketing Buzzword to Marketing Authority. On any search engine, Marketing Buzzword to Marketing Authority, you'll find the crowdfunding campaign, and you literally $15, like £11.50, like €13, or whatever currency you use. It's really not much, and it really helped me get this book out, and I get it out to you. You get a first edition copy side. There's loads of really cool bonuses on there, so please check it out. Now, on to this week's guest. This week's expert buzzword bee is a guy called Dennis Owen. Now, I met Dennis a few years ago out in America, and we got on really, really well, and we've been chatting a lot since, and I was thinking about other buzzwords I wanted to cover in this topic, and I thought he was perfect for it. So, Dennis is currently the general manager for social media and branding at Hong Kong Airlines. Dennis's role on the social media side is to understand how social media evolves as a discipline and incorporate it into Hong Kong Airlines at the enterprise level, specifically in the areas of brand, digital marketing, communications, customer service, HR and other departments, in order to meet the strategic objectives at a global level. I loved this conversation because it didn't just take into it looked at branding in a really digital era, and absolutely fascinating episode, and I can't wait to share this with you. So that's more than enough from me. Let's get on with the show. Hi, Dennis, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me today.
Oh, no, it's absolutely my pleasure, and it's great to obviously, this is why I love doing this podcast. I get to speak to you. I mean, we met, three years ago, maybe, and now you're based around the opposite side of the world in Hong Kong, and it's just so great to be able to we had a little chat before, and it's great to be able to speak to you again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about this conference is you meet all sorts of interesting people, and then you stay in touch via the various social media channels. Well,
exactly, and that's sort of the joy is sort of the modern world. I mean, people can criticize things whichever way they want to, but actually there are amazing benefits we can get out of this. I mean, this conversation probably would have never happened had we not sat next to each other, I think, in a conference 3 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
But brilliant, But the reason I think I really want to get you on today, Dennis, and it's because of the work that you do. We're not because you do a lot of work in social media, but you seem to be heavily linked with the branding side of things. So today I really want to sort of explore branding. So can you sort of explain to people why branding is important? Because obviously in this podcast I want to try and break down terms. I think for this one it's really important to understand what is branding and why it's important before we get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's, branding, I find it fascinating, and you talk about this association with social media, and the job I'm in now, My title is GM Branding and Social Media, and I was particularly interested in the role because of that, because to me they are so tied together. Years ago, I think definition of brand is what the company told you it was, but in the invent of social media, that's completely flipped over. So it's the customer who really owns the brand, because the brand is what they say it is. And now as a company, you can try to influence that, but you cannot tell people what they think the brand is. So, companies come out with logos and design and features and all the different parts of branding and trying to put it all together. But what are you doing? You're really trying to create a particular kind of perception for the customer so that they buy your product. And nowadays, you can't really fake it anymore. Again, it used to be 20, 30 years ago, you could put out advertisements that really wasn't what your product was, and you could get away with it. But in this day and age, you cannot do that at all. So it's actually better for, I think, the brands and the customers, because what you see is what you get. And if you put out a different kind of message, people on social media will kill you for it.
Yeah,
they'll call you on it.
Well, exactly. It's like that level of exposure, that level of, I guess, even risk is heightened, isn't it? Before you could make a branding faux pas, a branding error, and you may affect one or two people that really close stakeholders, but people who actually weren't in either the vicinity at the time or weren't actively involved with the company at that time, so they could say, you can be not actively following a company, actively engaging, or actively buying a product from a company, but yet you can still follow what they're up to, and that is an effect, a part of the branding, and that's something that is completely different. Whereas before, once you purchased a product and you moved away, wouldn't necessarily always be affected by that brand anymore, or have the opportunity to be affected by that brand anymore.
Yeah, very, very true. Yeah, it's all changed. It's really flip-flopped from what it used to be.
So with the work then that you do at Hong Kong Airlines, how do you maintain that consistency of branding across social channels? Because the way I look at this is each social channel is completely unique. Everyone requires a different type of content, a slightly different style. And I mean, you speak to all these different content producers, you speak to people who work in SaaS companies, and the way they do all these they create their content is completely different sometimes for every channel. So how do you actually maintain a consistent brand image or consistent brand identity across platforms where you have to produce different types of content?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought this up, because I am in full agreement that each channel has its own personality and its own audience. I see far too many brands that will take one piece of content and just slap it out and say the same thing across all of the channels. That really bothers me, because I think that's just lazy. I am not against taking a piece of content and putting it out on 3 or 4 channels, but I always try and say it in a different way, in a unique way, in a way that's targeted towards that audience. So if I've got something about in-flight menus or a picture of food, that's something that you might put on Instagram, because it's such a great place for great pictures of food. There's a lot of foodies on Instagram, but I might take that same content and put it on LinkedIn and talk specifically to the corporate audience on the style of food we have, the quality of food that we have, a particular food promotion and a chef we're using. So, in one, I may be talking to a business person, and on the other channel, I may be just talking to somebody that is interested in going on vacation, and I want them to consider Hong Kong Airlines because the food looks great. And whereas if it's on Twitter, it may just be very, short snippet about, just again, an image of a food, but just a short snippet.
Yeah.
So, but I think you maintain that consistency in understanding who you are as a brand, and what your core pillars are, and making sure that no matter what you put out across any channel, it fits into those pillars. So, for example, Hong Kong Airlines has a statement and 3 pillars. And so I always ask my team, make sure that the content flows into one of those pillars. And I'm saying every now and then it doesn't, that's fine. But I think 90% of the time you should be sticking to what your your brand statement is and what your core pillars are. So, we are a Hong Kong airline, and our statement tends to be around the fact that we're one of the few airlines in the world that actually has the name of the city attached to it. There's only 3 in the world like that. So when you hear the name Hong Kong Airlines, of course you're going to think of Hong Kong. So we want to naturally associate ourselves with the city, and we want to do that in a really authentic way where the service is joyful, it's personal, so that when people do fly us, they just see us as a natural extension of what is truly Hong Kong. And then our brand pillars tie into this association. So the 3 brand pillars, one of them is truly Hong Kong. The second one is delivering more. And what I mean by that is delivering more in terms of lounges, of service, different types of food offerings, that kind of thing. And then the last one is passion for service. And that one really is about going that step above and helping people to have a great experience. But I think for us, probably that main pillar is truly Hong Kong. So when you look at a lot of our content, we talk about Hong Kong and some of the hidden things behind it. But we always try and tie it back to the brand of Hong Kong Airlines where possible. And I think it's important that no matter what message you put out there, that you do try and tie it back to the brand. And I think that is particularly important in the travel space. And there's a lot of content out there around travel. You've got tourist offices putting out information about travel. You've got hotels doing it. You've got airlines doing it. So for me, as the Hong Kong Airlines brand, if I'm going to put something out on travel, I always ask myself, how do I tie it back to the brand? And one of the ways in some ways it can be quite subtle, but we're known for our cabin crew. The color of the uniform is purple. So if you're in Hong Kong and you see purple, that's Hong Kong Airlines. So sometimes if we're in the city and we're taking a shot of something, you'll see like a selfie, you might see the purple sleeve, for example. So it's just a subtle way that reminds you this is Hong Kong Airlines. It's not just a picture of the city, but it's tied to Hong Kong Airlines through that purple sleeve.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess for me, that it's really nice to sort of hear you talking about this, because again, this is something that from a completely different industry standpoint is I work for a SaaS company, and we've pretty much tried to go down actually a similar model. And I think it's quite a nice way of seeing actually how a model can be adapted down through different markets. So our central pillar is enriching and enabling humans and not replacing them, and that's one of our central pillars. And everything around that is, okay, how can people do marketing better with humans? How can they convert humans better? How can they use calls and all that sort of stuff? So we try and tie in our pillars around that sense of enabling and enriching human interactions, human marketing, human conversions, and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite interesting to actually think, if you, as a business, put in a couple of core pillars there, what do you really stand for? What do you really want your customers to think and feel about you? Actually, it's quite easy to create content that aligns and keeps your brand in place. Now, one thing I thought carry on, Dennis.
I said, no, go ahead, answer your question.
Well, one of the things that I really picked up on what you said there was right at the end, and you talked about the colours. Now, one of the big things I can think about, especially when you mentioned purple as well, one of the biggest brands that comes to my head when you say purple is Cadbury. So I know they tried to trademark their colour purple so that people recognise that. And I think that's a really important point in terms of colours. Now, people, when they see pictures of the sleeve they could be on a generic airplane. Let's be honest, most airplanes look pretty similar inside. But then they'll see one of your cabin crew with a purple sleeve. It is that instant bit of recognition. Now, for the average business, does colour really matter that much? I mean, should brands, because I see some brands and they work really hard to make sure that all their images maybe have a slightly orange tint on them. Also, is that just going over the top? Does that really matter or have an impact? Or is it just generally good practice? What's your thoughts around that sort of thing in terms of using colour?
Personally, I think it's a very important aspect to the brand, because if you see, particularly in Asia, we're known in Asia, very well. And if you see one of our people walking down the street, you instantly think Hong Kong Airlines. And I compare that to in the United States, where you've got U.S. carriers, and I hate to say this, but I think their uniforms are bland. They're gray, they're blue. The big airlines, if I saw one walking down the street, I don't think I could tell which one represented which airline.
Yeah,
that is not true. That's not true for Hong Kong Airlines. It's very, very clear. And I think a lot of people would be able to tell you if you're here in Hong Kong or in China or in Bali or some places that we fly to, and they saw them, they could probably tell you which airline it was. So I think it is important.
Yeah, and then from it's in terms of actually putting content out there through the social media element. Is it something that you should focus that every as many images as possible have a little bit of your color in it, or does it get to the point where it's slightly over the top? I think that was probably the point I was trying to make, is where people put like slightly orange tints in it, or have to have something orange, or have to have something purple in every picture. Where would you say that line sort of is?
Yeah, I've seen it done both ways. And I think I like the visual look when there is a similar kind of filter to it, I will admit. But I also think it does limit you in terms of what you can do. So a personality like Hong Kong Airlines, even that color purple, it says fun. You know what I mean? It's a fun color. So I think when it comes to our Instagram, you're going to see a lot of different colors versus kind of a subdued, filtered look, for example. But I think they both work. It just depends on the brand.
Yeah, personal preference and brand. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Now, in carrying on the same sort of theme, one of the other things that I sort of made a note of as we were having this conversation was, are there any areas then, particularly of branding in the modern era now? Are there any particular areas that brands and individuals who are in charge of a brand should look at particularly controlling? Is there any part of a brand that you think, actually, you know what, this is something that maybe have been really important in the past, such as particularly having a distinctive logo, whereas now actually it's maybe even more so about the colors now, or the way in which a video is presented or something? Is there any particular parts of branding you think are particularly important for people to control?
I do. I mean, I think as a company, you do need to control your brand in terms of what is being seen. And I'm thinking right now from an internal perspective, because you've got different companies with different agendas. You've got HR, you've got sales, you've got marketing, operations, different people. And if you're not careful in controlling around what the brand is, what the color palette is, it very easily could get off track and people go off and do their own thing. I don't think in many, many companies that a lot of employees even understand what brand is and what it really means. And those are the ones that I think you see all sorts of different colors, different styles, different 20 different newsletters with very different looks, that kind of thing. But that can also filter out to where the customer is too. It'd be one of those things if we weren't consistent in our signage around the world or what our lounges looked like. You could get very, very different experiences around the world. And as an airline, that's not good, because if you want to be a really quality brand and you want people to fly you, you want some sense of familiarity, that when you're flying us, it feels like home. Now, if home is completely different in every place you go, you're going to lose brand consistency, and then you're going to lose brand relevancy in many ways. So I think controlling a brand is quite important.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. But should then a business have what they would designate as a brand controller? And if that's so, who would be that person? Is it a marketing team? Is it a head of marketing that controls the brand? Is it the top brass of the organization, or can it be just a specific someone within a marketing team, as long as they understand how the brand works? How would you go about looking at controlling the brand?
Yeah, I do think it needs to sit in one department. Now, I'm in charge of brand, and I report to the chief marketing officer. So it's, in my view, that is where it belongs. I don't necessarily find at many companies that even the top level people understand brand. I think the The problem with brand is, it's a perception in the customer's eyes. It's not always something like concrete that you can hold and you can look at. There's no numbers to it, that kind of thing. So understanding what brand is can be a little bit vague for people. I think if I went around and asked 10 people, what is brand? I would probably get 90% staring at me and had to think about it for a while. You know what I mean? It's not like looking at a brick. Oh, it's a brick. It's subjective. So it's a harder thing to understand unless you have spent some time in brand or you've been trained in brand. So I do think it belongs in one department, because you've got to really educate people in the company what brand is. At one point, we are going to actually go around the company with a brand presentation. And it really is just a kind of a first step of educating in each department. This is brand. This is what it represents. This is where you fit into it. And this is why brand consistency is important. This is why sometimes we say no to certain things because it doesn't fit the brand guidelines, for example. And many, there's some companies that are really, really good at this. I mean, think about Apple, for example. You can go in any Apple store in the world. It's Apple. There is, the store setup might be different, but they are very, very cautious about their brand, and they are very strict about what they do in each store. So exactly where you are when you go to an Apple store.
Yeah, again, everything can be, like we talked about with the social media element, is everything can have its own slight twist. So, for example, no two Apple stores are going to be exactly the same. They could be slightly different layout, slightly different thing. But every time you go in there, that distinctive styling is going to be is the Apple Store style. So it can have its own little sort of local twists in there and add little different gems in there for the right audience. But ultimately, the whole branding is consistent. Now, is one of the things you mentioned when you were just talking then is you mentioned that you were going to do a brand presentation. Now, is that something that you think would be a potentially good way for a lot of businesses to do it? And am I right in saying that you didn't do that in the end? And if so, sort of why, and what other ways could people get buy-in from every element of the organization into brand?
Yes, no, we're in the process, so our intent is to do it. We just haven't done it yet, but we will, because I think it's important to do. And sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Yeah, so would you say that that's quite a simplistic, well, not simplistic, but it's quite a good way of being able to get brand in the eyes of, or in the ears of everyone else in the organisation? Is that quite a good way of opening up people's eyes, or do you think are there some other ways that you've also seen are quite useful of being able to get people's buy-in or understanding?
I think getting in front of people makes a huge difference, because it can be, I don't want it to be some boring presentation. I want to bring other elements, because brand is, it's not just what you see. It's sight, it's touch, it's taste, it's smell, it's hearing. So, I want to go in and have people shut their eyes and send around an iPad versus another type of, product like that. And ask them, what company do you think that this is? Now, I suspect if someone holds an iPad, they can probably know it's an Apple versus like Microsoft, for example. So I want people to understand that brand is not just about one thing, about what you see, or it's like a scent. Certain hotels have a particular scent that they specifically have in their hotels. So I want to spray something and say, tell me what this is, or get some really, really cheap perfume and one that's really, really good, and just talk about the difference in premium products and not premium products, just to kind of broaden their mind as to what brand encompasses, because it does include all of those elements of sight, touch, taste, smell, and hearing. Because I don't think anybody's really told it in such a way.
Yeah, I think
I think it's all very, very interesting, and there's so much depth to brand that people don't think about, but it still affects them. They just don't know it.
Well, exactly, and it's sort of making my mind whir back to where we talked about personal branding a couple of episodes ago, and actually those things, like when you think back to, for example, usually like a grandparent, and you think, oh, you can usually remember their smell. And it's like, you remember,
Yes.
that's one of those things, actually, look, and all these different things, actually, yes, you can put them all into a business brand, but actually a lot of them relate to your personal brand. And again, I was doing a presentation recently about how you build your personal brand, and I said, your personal brand is everything about you. It's the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you smell, the way you look, the way you act. Everything you do creates a perception of you. It creates a memory of you. If people remember you smell a certain way, or your hair was a certain... So I've read something before that it's like the way that your hair is. People remember that, and it's one of those weird psychological triggers. And people need to really understand actually all these different bits actually all fit in. As long as you have your jigsaw piece, each of these pieces could be your smell, your sight, your touch. And I think it's amazing the way you sort of actually, not just a presentation saying, this is our color scheme, this is why we do it. Actually, giving that actual, this is the difference in two brands. It's when you like a Coca-Cola bottle, for example. I think they designed that bottle so you wouldn't even have to know what it was. You could just hold the bottle and you know it's a Coca-Cola bottle.
Yeah, and you know that was all intentional, but most people don't even think about that.
And then that's almost the joy of brand, isn't it? You don't necessarily realize it, but yet it has an amazing underlying importance.
Yeah. I mean, what are brands trying to do here? They're trying to create experiences, and they're trying to create a positive memory. They want to get in your memory bank. So the next time that you want something to drink, you'll think of Coke, or the next time you fly, you think of Hong Kong Airlines because you had such a great experience. It's really about creating memories.
And then one of the things that my mind is keep going on from this now is I'm thinking, okay, this is all great, Dennis. I'm understanding that I need to create smells, images, or whatever it is. All these different elements fit into my brand. But is brand something that you can measure? Is there anything tangible? So, for example, how would you report the effectiveness of brand? If you had someone in your organization, how would you actually say, oh, our brand has been effective this month? Or how is our... How do you do that? Because it seems like one of those things, there's quite a lot of intangibles.
Yes. And I think that's a lot of time, that's the hard part for top level management, because they want to see numbers, they want to see revenue. So when you talk about brand, it's, there aren't as clear things, but I would say, that's all changing, because I do use social media and social listening tools. And there are brand sentiment numbers that you can track and follow, and do deeper dives into some of the social media content about what people are saying, what they're feeling about the brand. So, you're getting more and more data that pulls in to show people what brand is, and what is the brand going in the right direction, or is it going in the wrong direction? And if it's going in the wrong direction, what are they saying? So there's data out there now that you can start to show people that may not understand what brand actually is. And when and then when they can see figures, percentages, like our brand sentiment went up 5 points, that actually means something to them then.
Yeah, I see that all the time, isn't it? People like the idea of being able to say, oh, our brand awareness has increased, or our thing. But people go, well, what does that actually mean? Well, in the top line is, we had X number of growth in brand mentions, of which there was this percentage which was of a positive sentiment, this percentage of a negative sentiment. Yeah. These number mentioned us in this number of contexts, whereas we had less mentions in this number of contexts. So we had... That is, I guess, is the way in which you can position branding as a real integral part of marketing, and just as part of your marketing suite. And maybe instead of trying to think of branding as an exterior thing that you go, oh, it has to be, it's just a thing that you have to know you can control, but you don't really measure it. Actually, as a part of marketing, it feeds into all that. This is what keeps people coming back, because the way you write your content, and actually that's how brand fits in. It fits in with your normal marketing metrics, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think just in the last probably 5 years, I think that the insights from social media data has gotten even better. So it, like I said, it's something that I'm working on currently to create a brand health report for top level management that shows them numbers that show that we're going in the right direction, and why. So yeah, there's some good stuff out there now on brand that you can track.
Yeah, and do you think then there's going to be any more significant seismic shifts coming in the way that branding is done, on what becomes important in branding in the next couple of years? Because obviously in the last sort of 15 years, we've seen the rise of social and stuff, but there are some new tools coming down, like the likes of, say, chatbots, for example.
Yeah.
How do those play into brand? Because it seems that everyone's jumping on this chatbot bandwagon, which is great because chatbots have a real important place. But how do these tools going to affect branding? Because I see a lot of chatbots that are done really poorly, and it's almost like there's not lack of thought that goes about. So what do you see the future, and how do you see things progressing over the next couple of years?
I think artificial intelligence and things like chatbots, they are going to be a bigger deal. I think it's quite early days, and I get a little bit concerned for brands that just want to jump on it now, because you've got to be very, very careful about the customer experience. I particularly around if you're a brand that is in the customer service industry, it's very easy for the finance department to say, okay, let's just get chatbots in there and take out 20% of the people or whatever it is. I would not do that yet. I would take this very, very slowly, because it can backfire so quickly. As you said, it's happened to you, it's happened to me, where all of a sudden the chatbot can't answer the question, but then it just stops. So I think and they will get there to the point where you won't know it's a chatbot, and then when they have an issue that they can no longer handle, it will seamlessly switch to a human being that will know exactly what the conversation has taken place. So that's the goal. And I think that will happen. And I think that's where chatbots can bring in value for a brand, because, a lot of questions that come into companies like an airline are very, very similar. They're similar categories. And if they're very simple questions, you don't really need a human to answer that. Like, how many bags can I check? It's 2. That's not that hard for a chatbot to figure that out. But if it gets into more complexities around, I have a surfboard and a set of skis, a chatbot's not necessarily going to be able to answer that right away. So it's really about ensuring that as a brand that you don't move into the space faster than the capabilities is there to make sure that you're giving your customer a good experience.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get that right, that affects your brand.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we're talking about, experiences being sort of the next real big sort of shift in marketing, along with the likes of bringing in new technology. I guess, there's one of the things that everyone said there's a new shift. I guess now there's with the way the pace of change, there's 6 shifts happening at once, and it's incredible.
Yes.
But I guess it's as long as you're trying to sort of, again, it's not necessarily speeding up and trying to do all these different things, because again, all these if you start implementing all these different things, they have an impact upon brand and your perception. Whereas actually, if you take a step back and you think, actually, if this goes wrong or if this goes right as well, what sort of impact is this going to have on our business? I don't want people to suddenly think, always thinking that negative, what if this goes wrong? But you've obviously got to consider that. But actually, if this goes right, what is the impact this is going to have on our business? And actually, how is that going to affect the way that people want to deal with us? And how does that affect us versus our competition? It's amazing, actually, when you take a step back, the impact all this stuff has upon the way in which your brand is perceived.
Yeah, and I think what's really happening now is, as a brand, it's not just about the product, it's also about the service, it's about the customer service. I think customer service is becoming a much bigger distinguisher than it used to be in the past. I think we've all dealt with companies where bad customer service happens, and sadly, I think it happens a lot. So the ones that do customer care really well, I think, are standout brands, and people are willing to pay more for a brand where their customer service is good. I know I am. And I think customer service is going to be a key part of brand going forward.
Yeah, no, I can't agree more. And thanks so much for coming on today, Dan. So I think there's been some amazing insights upon branding. I love sort of the different a lot of the similarities between sort of a business branding and personal branding, and actually how you need to think bigger. And actually there are some tangibles and to be able to measure brand. I think that's one of the biggest problems that people associate with branding sometimes is they go, but I can't measure it. Well, actually, there are so many things you can measure. And yes, you might not have something that is directly like 100% you contribute there, but actually you can measure brand within so many different metrics. You just have to think about the context.
Yeah, you think about the context and make sure you've got someone that understands the analytics and know how to dig deeper into the right places. But there's good analytics there. You just need a mindset to get to it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. No, thanks so much for coming on today, Dennis. But before I let you go, I've got to ask you the question that I ask every guest before I let them go, Dennis. And I know I've sort of mentioned this to you already. So, what other marketing buzzwords out there right now are you loving or hating? What's really grinding your gears and making you sort of bang your head on the table? Or is it something that you're going, yes, I absolutely love this term, people need to embrace it?
I don't know if I don't know if I have a term for it, but it involves KOLs and being fake. I'm so tired of, I'm in the travel business, so I see key opinion leaders staying in hotels, looking out airplane windows, staring at clouds. It's all the same look. It's not real. It's at some point, I hope the tide will turn. It's just like social media should be about authenticity. When you have someone sitting in the window and there's a full 5-course meal laying on the bed, I'm like, yes, it's a beautiful photo, but it's not social media. Social media is a two-way conversation. It's not a print ad. And it just really bothers me that you've got brands out there that still think that they can talk in a way, using long, fancy words where it just be real. Like I like KOLs. They're just real. That's all I would say.
Well, I say that authenticity, isn't it?
Yes, that's the word, authenticity.
Yeah, the other thing I've just picked up on there, which I absolutely love, and I think it's something that I spoke with Ashley Duderenok, who was obviously based in China, and I love how in Asia they're using this term KOL, or key opinion leaders, whereas obviously in America stuff it's all based upon influencers, and I think that's something that strikes me about that, and I love that sort of differences, and I'm actually going to use that as one of the examples in the book that I'm writing at the moment, just sort of looking at those cultural differences between buzzwords and terms. I think that's something that absolutely fascinates the life out of me. Yeah,
that's true. I hadn't really thought about that, being from the United States, but I use the term KOL because I'm here in Hong Kong.
Yeah. So. Oh, it's absolutely amazing. No, thanks so much for coming on today, Dennis. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely love that. And literally, this episode lived up to all my expectations. I'm a big fan of Dennis and what he's doing at Hong Kong Airlines in his previous job at Cathay Pacific, and that was eventually where we first started chatting. And it's really great to see sort of actually from a slightly bigger organization how they're working really hard in terms of making sure that branding is an important part of going forward, and having a senior role like this that's really dedicated to branding and actually how you can measure that, how it works with social media and an online presence. I think it was an absolutely fascinating conversation. I think it's something that you guys will get an absolutely incredible amount out of, and I can't thank Dennis enough for coming on. Before I let you go though, I do need to remind you again, please do, if you have enjoyed this show and want to read more about it, I am writing a book which takes into account a lot of guests from this show and really looks at how you can build a business brand through marketing buzzwords, or actually how you can build your own personal brand through marketing buzzwords, and how you can align yourself and what it actually all means. Please Google Marketing Buzzword to Marketing Authority. It's on a crowdfunding platform called Publishizer. I really, really do appreciate it. Even if you could just order a single copy, that'd be absolutely amazing. Right, thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back on Thursday with another bite-sized buzzword. Goodbye.
This podcast is part of the You Are the Media Network.